Oh, hi there. Ollie Anderson here. You're listening to Creative Status. This is a podcast about using your creativity to improve your life, help you to unblock and unlock the real version of yourself through your creative endeavors, challenging yourself, getting in the sweet spot of just stretching yourself enough to feel truly alive and to push through all your limitations and all that kind of thing. This episode is an interview with Brenden Kumarasamy. He is a communications expert. You might have seen him on YouTube. He's got a channel where he helps people to improve their communication skills in a very real way. This interview covers a lot of things to do with growing real in general, particularly around having this mindset where you need to be experimental in your approach to life, how you need to face reality at a very deep level, particularly at the level of accepting that we're all going to be dead one day. If you know me, that's one of my favorite topics, so I'm really happy that it came up. But anyway, when you face death, you understand that time is really important. And so you act with a sense of urgency. Acting with a sense of urgency will get you out of your head quite a lot of the time. It'll stop you holding yourself back. It'll stop you blocking yourself because you don't have time to kind of hesitate and worry about all this nonsense that stops us being real in the first place. I really got a lot out of this conversation. I hope that you do too. If you listen to it and you like it, please leave a review somewhere, if that's something you want to do. And otherwise, just enjoy what you hear. I hope that it gives you some value, and I'll see you next time for the next episode of Creative Status. Here we go. Here's the interview. Enjoy. Oh, hi there, Brenden. Thank you for joining me today on Creative Status. We're going to explore, I think, some themes to do with communication and creativity, seeing as you're famous on YouTube for your creative discussions around communication and that kind of thing. Before I start grilling you, have you got anything that you would like to say to the world, or would you like to introduce yourself and let us know who you are, what you're all about, that kind of thing?
For sure, Ollie. Great to be here, man. Thanks for having me. And definitely not famous. So, yeah, my name is Brenden, the founder of MasterTalk. It's a YouTube channel I started to help people with their communication skills and public speaking. And my mission is to help every human being on earth become a great speaker.
You know, that's pretty amazing. Have you learned anything on that journey, just to dive right into this, about how people can learn to communicate with themselves first and foremost in order to get the kind of results that you're helping them get in the world at large?
Yeah, I would say, Ollie, what stuck out to me when it comes to communication with oneself is really the quality of the questions that we start to ask ourselves about life. In the
Huh.
sense that a lot of human beings in general, the reason they don't have clarity is because they don't spend enough time with themselves asking themselves one hard question about life every single day. Let me give you a few examples of what this means. I call them 80-20 questions. We know about the 80-20 principle. So, what are
Yep.
the questions that drive 80% of the clarity? Here's one I'll throw at you. If you had all the money in the world, how would you spend your time? If I made you retire right now, what would you do for the rest of your life? And most people just don't have an answer to that question.
Yeah. I think for me, I would probably travel more and write and all that kind of stuff. Why do you think most people do not know this stuff about themselves? Like, it's cool that we've just dived right into this because this is a major theme of this podcast. Most people, they are so distanced and disconnected from themselves because they've got all of this noise in their heads and these false beliefs and these ideas and these fake stories that they're telling themselves that they've been conditioned with, and it's just stopping them from actually living in alignment with their true values and their true intentions. So the question for you is, how did people find themselves in this situation in general, and how can they start asking themselves these kind of questions more regularly, or what other techniques can they use to start unblocking themselves and letting this real self come out a little bit?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to think about this, Ollie, is just to spend more time to keep it really simple. So, for example, let's say me and you, and this wasn't recorded, and we were just talking, and you just gave me your answer, right? Traveling and writing, which
Mm-hmm.
is a great start. I wouldn't just leave you off the hook and say, okay, that's great. Let's move on to the next question. Now, I'd force you to write a page on that answer. I would say, okay, but what do you mean,
Mm,
Ollie? Are you going to travel for 5 years, 10 years? Because you got a whole life here. Are you going to travel for 50 years? How many times a week? How many days a year? What does writing mean? Does that mean you're going to
mhm.
write 2 hours a week? Does that mean you're going to spend because you got the other, because you don't have to work anymore, because I just gave you $10 million. So what are we doing now? So notice how these probing follow-up questions are forcing you all, and you don't have to answer any of these questions just to prove a point,
Mm,
forces you to go deeper on that singular question. Whereas
yeah.
most of us, we either don't know the question, or if we do, we don't take it seriously enough. So if I was somebody listening to this, like for me, the reason I have the clarity of someone who's already passed away, that's what I always like to say, is because I've answered thousands of questions at this level of granularity. So even if I'm 26 years old, I have the clarity of someone who's already gone.
Yeah. So I suppose what you're saying is you need to you need to spend more time with it, of course. But actually, the consequence of spending that dedicated time to looking at these kind of questions is that you get more clarity and more specificity about what it is exactly that your vision for yourself entails.
Correct. And then that leads a lot into creativity because it helps you find your unique voice, your unique essence, because
Hmm.
we're all a copy of one. Right? We're all, or rather we're all a one of one. There's no other human being that will ever have the same set of experiences in life that we will live, which
Hmm.
automatically implies that there's a unique essence that each of us have that we do not express, or that we could express. It's just most of us make the decision not to try to find it in the first place.
Yeah. There's so much going on there. Why do you think first of all, why do you think we don't make that decision to uncover this essence or this vision that's inside of us? Is it a case of most people don't know it's there? They're just walking through life on autopilot. Or is there some other stuff going on, like they're scared to find out who they really are, or they just simply don't have time, or what's causing that decision not to be made?
I think it's a mix of all of the above. So great points there, Ollie. I would say the main one for me, the way I've seen it, is really the idea that most human beings let their biology take over their actions and how they live life. What do I mean
Mm,
by that? Our
mm-hmm,
brain is not wired for happiness, Ollie. It's wired for survival. And
mm,
what is the best way to survive? The best way to survive is to fit into the tribe. So tens and tens, it might even be hundreds of thousands of years ago, who knows? I'm not a historian. If you got removed from your tribe, you would die
yeah.
because you're just dead. Like you can't move to like Wisconsin or like a different city. Like that's the tribe. You're hunting food, and if you don't belong, you don't fit in. You're just finished. The tigers will eat you or something. But in today's era, what that looks like, in my opinion, is, well, if Ollie is buying a house he can't afford, if he's getting married without making the right decision, if he has 2.5 cars that he's buying into debt, and he has a white
Mm,
picket fence, what this does is it shows what exceptionalism looks like. It's, hey, if you don't have Ollie's life, if you don't follow that, you can't fit in, and if you don't fit in, you can't survive. So a lot of people, they just choose to copy other people's accomplishments. They just choose to follow other people because that is the best way to survive. Whereas the people who actually break through the mold actually fight their own biology, and they say, no, no, no. My life's
mm.
happiness, my unique essence, is actually more important than what my brain is telling me to do, my body is telling me to do. So I'm going to take over my own biology and make my own decisions.
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of the time, like overcoming this obsolete biological wiring is about our capacity to take risks. Do you think that's true? And what's stopping us from taking the risks? Like I know you've kind of just mentioned like there's social pressure and wanting to belong in the tribe. Is there something we can do to minimize the risk we perceive of going against the grain in that way?
For sure, Ollie. I think there's different ways you can approach this, and all of us gets to that answer in a different way. But I'll give you the most common one. I think a lot of people just struggle with money. So if we use Haslow's, or Maslow's, so rather,
Yeah.
hierarchy of needs, self-actualization is the top of the list, but the bottom is food, shelter, water, close friends, those types of things. So if we don't have that, we'll never search for actualization. So for me, and this was my case, right, from the ages of 0 pretty much to 21, I wasn't focused on changing the world or discovering myself or going on some trip like the alchemist. It was about no, like I need to make money.
Mm,
I'm the first person in my family to graduate from university, to be born in a first world country like Canada. I'm not going
mm,
to be a business owner. I don't need to be creative. I never thought I was creative until 3 to 5 years ago, Ollie. Remember,
mm.
I wanted to be an accountant, right?
Yeah,
Not an artist. So for me, it was really around money. I'm not afraid to say that. But when I started making money with the gift that money gives you, and it doesn't need to be $1 million a year, it could literally be $70,000 a year and $60,000 a year, and you live with 2 to 3 other people in the same home making the same amount of money. Well, you're safe at that point if you're smart with your money.
mm,
What happens when you start making it is your stress around it changes. So you have more brain power, you have more time to think about things like self-actualization, purpose, that you normally ordinarily would not think about. So for
mm.
example, the single mother with 7 kids doesn't give a shit about the conversation we're having right now because she's just worried about taking care of her kids. But if you
Yeah,
can get
yeah.
over that hump, then you jump into the meat of the life.
Yeah. So how do you, in terms of Maslow's hierarchy, is there a structured way that you've found in general terms for moving up through that in relation to creativity? So what you're saying is actually there is kind of a pathway you can put yourself on. First, you get the survival stuff in place. Then you can start thinking about these kind of deeper creative questions that we all need to be asking ourselves anyway.
Fascinating question, Ollie. I love it. Here's my perspective. And I'm not taking this as the word of God. I'm sure there's other facets to go here. But I'd say the best framework that's worked well in my life is a framework presented by Gay Hendricks. He talks about your zone of genius. So your zone of genius is when what you love, what the world needs, and what you're really good at, like what is the market willing to provide that
Mm-hmm.
brings you joy, when it's the intersection of all three things. So
Yeah,
does it
yeah,
make
yeah,
you
yeah.
money, does it serve other people, and do you really love it? But the argument I would drive, Ollie, is finding your zone of genius is actually really, really difficult because it requires a lot of inner work to find out.
Yes.
Like I didn't know MasterTalk was the thing until like what, 5 years ago. So the antidote, in my opinion, is I think most of us should start with their zone of excellence rather than a zone of genius. And our zone of excellence is simply, what does the world need that makes us money? Like what does
Mm,
the world
mm,
need that we're
mm.
really, really good at? And it doesn't need to bring us joy. I know that's a very counterintuitive perspective, so for me, being an
Sure.
accountant was never about like, oh my god, I love these numbers. I just looked at my report card and I was like, I'm really, really good at math. Let me just focus on that. And then when I started finding my zone of excellence and I crushed it, even if I wasn't the happiest person on earth, it gave me the income, the sustainability to then find my purpose, find my zone of genius, which I'm in now,
Mm,
without
mm.
having to struggle along the way.
Yeah, I think that's amazing, and it's a very logical way to go about it.
Yeah, it's
First,
more
make
pragmatic.
yeah, yeah. First, survive, then make the money. So you're doing a bit more than surviving. You're actually enjoying your quality of life, but then use the opportunities that come from that to go out there and become self-actualized and to stare into your belly button and figure out your values and true intentions and all that kind of stuff. A lot of people, I think, like I've seen in my coaching practice or whatever, they they forget the basics and they jump straight into the lofty levels of self-actualization and all that kind of stuff. But without the survival, the foundation of being able to survive at bare minimum, it just becomes something that exacerbates the problems they already have. And instead of them moving forward and being able to take action because they don't have the funds or whatever to do it, it just becomes a kind of self obsession almost that holds them back from actual self actualization.
So well said, Ollie. I love this conversation. You're absolutely right. And I'll give you another perspective that I think is a generalized principle that definitely applies for everybody listening,
Mm,
which is people like there's a great quote by Randy Posh on this. It's not the cards that are dealt, but rather how you play the game. So what
Yeah.
does that mean?
Yeah.
It means we have zero control over what cards were dealt. But what most people do with their hand the given is they focus too much time on Instagram or on TikTok watching other people's hands being dealt versus actually spending the time to understand the cards they have in front of them. So I had a lot of great things about my life, a lot of bad things. Alcoholic father, bad thing. Dysfunctional family, bad thing. But I had a lot of great things going for me. I have $1 million passport. I live in Canada. That's an automatic pass. I didn't have to
Mm-hmm.
immigrate. I didn't have to buy properties. I'm just born in Canada. And the other piece to South Asian culture is my parents are the type of people, even if we had fights, we had arguments, where they'll never disown me. Like if I want to live in my parents' house for my old 20s and never pay rent, they'll always support me. And I use that in my advantage. We weren't the richest people in the world, but basically what I did when I looked at my personal circumstances, which are different
Mm-hmm.
from everyone else's, my number was 50,000. It wasn't $500,000. It was, wait a second, if I make 50, my sister makes 40 and my mom makes 20 and we all live in the same house, I can go
Mm.
straight to self-actualization, which is what happened.
Wow. Do you think so one way I like to think about life in general is using a similar analogy to this playing cards thing. You can break it down into bio, psycho, social. So biological, psychological, and sociological. The bio, like you kind of said earlier in the conversation, that is the cards that we've been dealt. It's the things that we have to deal with in terms of our own biology. I suppose you can also bring like physics into it as well. So the way that life just is and the way that life just works, they're the cards that we've been dealt. There's nothing you can do about it. So you have to either accept it or figure out a way to work with it. Then there's the psychological. That's what you want to do with those cards. It's what your mindset allows you to be able to think that is possible with the cards. If you've got a weak mindset or an unrealistic mindset, then you're going to hold yourself back unnecessarily. If you're Another way that that can show up is you might think you have too many possibilities because you've been idealistic instead of real or realistic. Either way, what you choose to do with those cards depends on your relationship with yourself. But then the sociological barrier to the cards is that the world says, oh, actually, you can do this, you can do that, either for real reasons or unreal reasons. And it's up to you, based on your psychological relationship with yourself, to be able to decide if the world is bullshitting you or if the world is actually a reflection of reality. So all of that comes into play. But the question that I was going to ask you is, okay, yeah, we all have these cards that we've been dealt. There's bad stuff, like you said. There's good stuff, like you said. But one thing I've been thinking about recently in my own life is that even with the bad cards or the things that seem bad, in scare quotes, is that if you look into those negative things with a real creative point of view or a real creative mindset, you can find a way to spin it or to turn it into a positive or not just a positive. You can turn it into a creative thing for moving forward and building momentum if you've got the right mindset. That was a very long-winded way of saying it. But do you think that even with the bad cards we've been dealt, if we're creative, we can find a positive solution or steps forward to take with those cards?
Correct. That's the way I see it as well, which is it's not about looking and focusing on the bad cards, to your point. It's about realizing that everybody has good cards and everybody has bad cards.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And when we look at it from that perspective, and let's say we're playing poker together, when you're playing poker, you don't think about, oh crap, I need to change my hand. I wish I had somebody else's hand. You go like, no, I got to work with what I got.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Do
yeah.
I need a bluff? Do I need a pick? Do I need a call? Like you're not thinking about, oh my god, could I bribe the dealer to give me another hand? Like that's how the game works. And it's the same thing with life. We can't change that hand, but what we can do is understand it better. And to your
Mm,
point, you could make a story that proves or disproves anything. Let me give you a fun story around, let's say, my life. So anyone could have said that, oh, Brendan's too young to do MasterTalk. Brendan has the money for it. He doesn't know anything about YouTube. He's on his mother's couch, which is true, right? He's barely does has a bachelor's degree in accounting. Speaks French as a first language. How is he supposed to teach the world communication?
mm,
He should wait. Somebody older should do it. But then let's make up the same reasons why he should do the exact same thing. Well, who's going to relate to the 15-year-old girl, Ollie? Nobody. Like, no, that 50-year-old girl isn't going to listen to the 55-year-old guy. So, basic what I'm saying, without being too long-winded here, is you could literally make an excuse with the same set of circumstances to do something or not do something. So, if you're in your 20s, you could say, I'm too young. Or you could say, I have all the energy in the world and I have nothing that's holding me back as a crutch. I don't have kids. I don't have a mortgage. I don't have a wife, a husband. I can make this work. Or you could say, I'm too young to do anything. I probably should do nothing. Then in your 30s, you could say, oh, I finally have enough experience to do something. Let's do it. Or you say, I just got married. I have a lot of expenses.
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
had
yeah.
my first kid, so on and so forth. So I think it's all about not judging the circumstance, because the circumstance is objective, but rather making sure that our subjective interpretation of our circumstances benefits us rather than hinders us, and we get to choose that, which I think
Yeah,
is awesome.
yeah. This is awesome. So, in terms of this overarching structure of kind of moving forward with our creativity and getting the results that we want, we're kind of coming up with something here, which is that the first step is kind of going through this process of tuning into your essence, whatever that happens to be in the context of your life, creating some kind of a vision or choosing some kind of a vision for yourself that is aligned with that essence. So for me, that's just our true values and our true intentions ultimately, and then translating that into some kind of concrete, tangible thing to move towards. But then the next step is getting out of your own way by realizing that actually, if you look at the way reality actually works, there is no reason whatsoever ultimately to not go out there and try and do the shit that you want to do. The only thing that actually stops you is your interpretations, like you've said, or your perspectives, or the distortions in your own mind that will give you some kind of a bullshit story to not get started in the first place, or that will tell you that the failures you've perceived in your own life, or the mistakes you've made, or the negative cards that you've been dealt, are somehow an obstacle. But they're only an obstacle or a barrier, impediment, if you don't have this understanding that if you look for the lesson and the opportunity ultimately in every one of these things that arises, then you can keep moving forward and you can keep going and you probably get results, if you just work with the law of averages.
Absolutely. And then the last piece of that is creating urgency to
Mm,
find this. A lot of people, Ollie, the simple truth here is most human beings do not make their purpose their priority.
yeah, it's
They
true.
make their vacations their priority. They make buying a new house their priority. They make spending a lot of money on their wedding a priority. They do not make their purpose a priority. And that's why they never find it. Whereas for me, even from the beginning, even when I had no money and I was broke and I didn't know what I want to do in life, I always told myself that even if I never found my purpose, at least I could be a really rich executive and donate some money to charity. And that's my purpose. That's literally what I tell myself. But I'd say maybe one day I can find it. And my whole life was optimized for finding my purpose before I ever found it. That's why I found it at such a young age, right? So I'll give you like specific examples here. One, I never moved out of my mom's house, even when I was making 75K a year in my corporate job, because I just wanted to save money. Maybe there's a purpose that's going to come out. Maybe there's something that I'm going to be able to do. That's first thing. Second, I don't own any pets because it's just an extra expense. It's an extra distraction I didn't want. Nothing against pets, right? It's just if you don't have money, go play with them in an SPCA. Go take care of them. You don't need to actually spend money on them every month, right? So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is I income combined. Income combining just means that you live with multiple people in the same house, so your expenses go down dramatically. So even if the average income in the US, just using the US, but the UK it's probably a similar number, is probably 50, 60K. Okay, well if you work with 2 to 3 other people and you're all buddies, they don't have to be family members, your household income is gonna be way higher than most people. So, because I optimized my life for purpose, I had a lot less anxiety and I spent a lot of time thinking. So,
Yeah.
MasterTalk landed on my lap, but that was by any means not an accident.
Just to go back a little bit to the urgency thing, do you think part of the problem for most people that are not in touch with any sense of purpose or vision or any of the things that come with having a purpose, the problem is that most people, they just think they're going to live forever. They don't value their own time. And because they don't value their own time for whatever reason, they don't value how that time can be used as an investment to get a life that you actually want before it all end because death is inexorably coming and there's nothing you can do about
That's correct. Most people are not willing to stare death in the eyes because they're scared. They're not willing to make death their friend
it. Mm,
because death is a part of the journey. Death is a gift. And the reason I say it's a gift is because it's a reminder for all of us to take our life more seriously.
yeah.
If we were immortal beings, I would be a lazy ass on my couch doing nothing every day because
Yeah.
because I would have a million years to be the best
Yeah. Yeah.
communication
Yeah.
coach on earth. Like it's just be like, okay, whatever. Like let me just go eat some food and like not do anything, watch Game of Thrones or something. But because death is a constant reminder that time is limited and time is uncertain, you don't know how many years.
Mm,
It creates a level of urgency if you let it create it for you.
yeah.
Meaning there's a couple of questions that people can ask themselves to force this in the forefront. One question is, who suffers from your inability to take action every day? So this
Mm,
forces you to think about the who behind your why. Who suffers? And if you really picture that person in your mind, you become relentless. So for me, it was the 7-year-old girl in Cambodia who can't afford a communication coach. If I don't make videos for her, literally nobody's making videos for her, Ollie. That's
mm,
why I started spending money on my YouTube channel that I didn't have, right? It was like 25, 30% of my income for my production. That's how much I cared. So that's one piece. The other piece is writing your own eulogy, your own funeral speech. When you're dead and somebody's reading who you are, how you lived, how you conducted yourself, what would you want that person to say about the actions you took,
mm,
the accomplishments you had, and the character that you led with in your life? That's the second piece. And then the third piece, and there's so many more things that we could talk about around this, but the third piece is to journal the last year of your life. Literally sit down and go, whatever that last year is, whether it's 65, 85, 27, literally sit down and go like, how do I want that last year to go
mm.
in life, and detail and journal that, and that will put death right in front of you.
Yeah, amazing. Like I completely agree. I don't think it's possible to have a good life without embracing death at some level. And it's for all the reasons that you just said, like or we've just explored. It makes you value your own time, obviously. It helps you to put things in perspective. It helps you to start thinking about, oh, okay, this time is running out. So what do I want to be doing at certain stages in my life? And I better act quick with the urgency that you've talked about. But I think more than that, the death thing aligns you with the way that things actually work. And so a lot of people are running around kind of hiding from the facts about life because they're scared of death, like you said. And so because of that, they're not in the flow of life. They're living in their heads, they're living in a little box, the ego, whatever you want to call it. And that prevents them from actually living the life that they want to live because everything that they do is filtered through that box, which is a reaction to their fears about life instead of their openness to going out there and embracing life and living life while they can. And so for me, the death thing is super, super important because it gets you moving. It keeps you moving. Like you said, if you think you're going to live forever, there's no reason to grow. There's no reason to change. And so by facing death, it puts us in touch with reality. And reality is what we need to be in touch with if we want to be more creative. And so the death thing kind of just cracks it all open, I think.
I completely agree. And then another piece around this, which might be easier for people to digest if they're already scared of me as it is a book by Bronnie Ware called The Five Regrets of the Dying. So Bronnie
Yeah,
Ware
yeah.
was a nurse, and I don't know if she's still working as a nurse, but basically she would study. She
Mm.
basically sit down and watch people die. That's what she did as a living, and she would hear their stories around the regret. And what this does is it really helps us move into the future really fast and go, how do I not make the same mistakes as my fellow human beings?
Mm.
And
Mm.
one of them, I mean, I'll give you a personal one. Like my mom, there's a reason why I still live with my mother. It's not because I need the money or any of that stuff. I'm a pretty successful business now. It's because a lot of the regrets that my friends had when their moms died in their 20s was that they didn't spend enough time with them. They
Mm.
moved out
Mm.
too quickly. So
Mm.
I just said, like, look, I'm not really doing anything. My business is online based. I don't need to move out. So I'd rather just live with her. So if she died tomorrow, which she won't because she's in good health, but let's say she did, I would be sad, I'd be frustrated, but I wouldn't regret anything because I'd spent the vast majority of my life with her, which most people can't say.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Like that's another good thing about the death thing. It doesn't just make you appreciate your own life; it makes you appreciate other people while they're around. and make better decisions so you can have better relationships and all that kind of stuff. So to bring this back to the creativity thing, how does the death thing, if it does, make us more creative in general? Like, how can we use what we learn from death? And I didn't think we were going to go down this road, but here we are. What can we learn from death to help us be more creative in life in general?
For sure. So I feel, and I'm sure you talk about this a lot, constraints breed creativity.
Mm,
Right? So when we say, for example, just as a reminder for the audience, if you say give me an idea for X company, you'll find some ideas. But if you say give me an idea for X company and you can't list more than 5 ideas and you only have 10 minutes to do it, you'll actually be more creative because there's constraints.
yep.
So I think, funny enough, it's weird, I've never said this on a podcast, but I think death is the ultimate constraint, right? Because there's a timer in our life to figure out what our unique essence is and share it with the world. So
Mm,
for me,
mm,
like, it's weird because I have every excuse in the world not to do MasterTalk at a very urgent level. I mean, I'm 26. I'm not going away anytime soon.
mm,
But because of death, it creates an urgency in my mind that says, well, what if I died when Kobe died?
mm,
Because he
mm.
didn't think he was going to die, and he was done at 41, 42 because of a helicopter crash.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's always somebody we admire, Ollie, that in our life, and it could be a singer, it could be an uncle, it could be a politician that died really young. So for me, it was Kobe. It was
Mm,
like, oh my God, like I don't watch basketball, but I really admire that guy. And his death is a lesson for me, which
mm,
is, hey, Brenden, don't make the same mistake I did, because I thought I was going to live until 80 and I actually got my life cut in half.
mm.
So you should assume that you're going to die at 41. So assume that you only have 5 to 10 years. And that's the secret. Right? This is the stuff people don't ask me about, Ollie. But this is why I became ridiculously successful in my industry
Mm,
relative to my age. Not
mm.
because I'm more powerful, not because I'm smarter, but because the level of urgency I had to
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
succeed
yeah,
was so much more than other people,
yeah.
that I was forced into action. Because
Mm,
my fear, and I genuinely mean this, Ollie, like,
mm,
if I died next year, my biggest regret in life was I didn't have enough time to become the next Dale Carnegie.
mm.
Because my videos might live, but I didn't become famous enough where my videos will last thousands of years. So I have that urgency to get there as quickly as possible, and most people just don't have that.
Yeah. This is really powerful stuff, actually, because now this is all kind of coming full circle. The urgency thing is so important for creativity. Like, whether it's working on a creative project or, like you said, it's been more creative in life in general, you need to know that you're going to die one day. You need to know that there are constraints to living. And actually, if you just sit around overthinking everything and getting, analysis paralysis because you can perceive too many options and all that kind of stuff, if you don't have something putting pressure on you to go out there and get shit done, then you won't do anything, because human nature will freeze up if there are no constraints or pressures upon them. And actually, by seeing things as urgent, you act with speed. And acting with speed is actually probably the best thing you can do for creativity, because by acting with speed, you're not overthinking things, you're not putting mental barriers in your way. You're just doing it and allowing the results to speak for themselves. And that is where a lot of people go wrong, I think. They don't act with speed. They have to prepare everything a million times over and so on and so forth. They need a perfect plan, which you can't have anyway, because the plan only exists in our heads and reality is reality. You need to just go out there and do it. And a lot of people don't do that because they think they're going to live forever, or they don't want to change, or they don't want to grow, whatever psychological thing they've got going on. How can we bring more urgency into our lives in general?
Right. So there's two parts to that. One is a quote that you remind me of, and then let's get into the urgency piece, which is by Jeremy Cowart. And he says, the more you execute, the more you fail. The
Mm,
more you fail, the more you don't care. The
mm,
more you don't care, the more you execute.
mm,
So what does that mean? That means the more you do things, the more mistakes you make. The more mistakes you make, the more you don't care about making mistakes anymore. And when you don't care about making mistakes anymore, you just do more things. And that simple principle when we couple it with urgency, when we create that urgency in our life, we just go, well, I don't have time to be perfect anymore. I'm
Yeah,
dead.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
finished.
yeah.
Like, so now it's like, I got to figure this out. That's why, when I started making videos 3 years ago, I literally didn't edit a single one for the first year. I
Mm,
was just practicing on camera, but I just told myself I should just be posting once a week. That's it. Like, I never thought about people were going to watch this, people would care. I just sat down and I said, nobody's making these videos. Maybe I got something. And this goes back to
mm,
this quote by Rob Dyrdek, which is follow your energy, not necessarily your passion. So a lot of
mm,
people are trying to pick, they're trying to select, they're trying to choose their passion, like they're choosing a lunch at a restaurant or something. Like, what should I order? Like, no, that's not how life works. You could order everything on that restaurant like
mm,
menu. You could just order
mm,
everything,
mm.
right? And that's the same thing with passions. Is if you order a couple of little things at a restaurant, you'll find out really quickly what you like and what you don't like. Just show up every day and order something different, and in 30 days you'll know exactly what you want to order at that restaurant for the rest of your life. It's just most people aren't willing to spend the time and the money to do that. So it's the same analogy with passions, with creativity, which is the focus is really on the output. MasterTalk didn't just land on my lap. I tried for a bunch of different things. I was like, okay, I know I'm an educator, but what should I teach? And then
Mm,
I went into career coaching, and then I went to life coaching, and I was like, I can be good at this, but I don't think I'll be the best in the world at this. And then
mm.
I saw a big gaping hole in communication. I wanted to fill it. So it eventually led me there. But if we don't take the actions
Yeah,
to
yeah,
create that urgency, we'll never get there for sure.
yeah. But I suppose you can add an extra level. It's urgency, but it's also experimentation in those initial stages. So because time is precious, we're all going to die one day, blah, blah, blah. You need to get an idea in your head about what might work, go out there, try it with speed. If it works, that's awesome, keep doing it. If it doesn't work, then you need to do another iteration or another experiment until you land on something that actually clicks for you and it's aligned with that essence that you talked about right at the start.
Exactly. And that's what people don't get, Ollie, is you only need one home run.
Mm,
You don't need 100 of these things to work. Oh my God, people are going to see me fail this at this. I failed at so many things. It's ridiculous. I get rejected every day. I
yep.
don't want to buy your product. I don't want to do this. I don't want you to be on my podcast. I don't want you to do that. And it doesn't matter, because the focus is you only need one Ollie to say yes for you to be on the podcast. You
Mm,
only need one person to buy your product. You only need one person who believes in you, and you triple down on that person. Whereas I think what's unsuccessful people do is they try three things, those three things don't work, and they just give up. Whereas the successful person tries
mm,
173 different things, and none of those things work, so they try another 332 things,
yeah.
and then out of those things one of them works, and they become a massive success
Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
that industry. I
Yeah.
just did my reps really young. I did those 500 reps super super young in life, so I just have my thing that I'm going to focus the rest of my life on. But it's not because I got lucky, it's because I was just willing to make my purpose my priority. Last piece on that, that's why I like talking about money. This is why my focus, my advice is always start with your zone of excellence. If you're meant to be a painter, but you're a really good entertainment lawyer that can make 250 grand a year, I would encourage you to be the entertainment lawyer and don't overspend your lifestyle. So you have so
Mm,
much money in the bank that you can quit that job in 3 years, have like $200,000 in your checking account, provided you're not stupid with it, and literally just spend the next decade finding your purpose. It's just most people don't want to do that. When they start making more money, they just get lifestyle creep and they overspend and they get into trouble.
yeah, yeah, yeah. They start to identify with the lifestyle they've got, which is actually not the lifestyle they wanted in the first place. But then that identity just becomes the new norm, and that's it. They have a new comfort zone that they're stuck within. They kind of forget about their dreams and all that kind of stuff, and they just go through the motions until they drop dead. Something like that.
Literally, Ollie. Like, and I'll give a personal example, not to brag or anything, but I think it's helpful. My starting salary at IBM was exceptional. I got put into $200 a day hotels, lobster, caviar, you name it. Like, I had everything, right? And my bonus, if I stayed, would have been massive. I would be making $250,000 a year if I'd stay there for 5 years. But obviously, you gotta give up your life in exchange. You're working 70, 80 hours a week there to get that type of money.
Mm,
Yet I didn't buy a thing. All of my friends at that company, they got into new places. They bought a nice BMW because they could afford it, and they started, treating their girlfriends a little bit better, their boyfriends a little bit better, buying them rings, things like that. I didn't do jack shit. I
Mhm.
didn't do any of it. I kept all the money. I stayed in my broke student mentality, even if I was poor my whole life up until that point,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I said having leverage is the most important thing for my purpose, and it paid off because I needed that money 3 years later when I quit to do
yeah.
MasterTalk full time.
And it's all because you had that vision. Like, if you didn't have the vision, you would have just been living in the short term, and then you would have been spending the money and all that kind of stuff. Because you had the vision and you could see where you were going, that informed all the choices that you made, which ended up paying off in the long run.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One thing we were talking about is this experimental mindset that people get into. It's about ultimately being outcome independent. And the more that we understand, again, just to bring it back to the death thing, the more that we understand that we're not going to be around forever, the easier it is to put things in perspective and to realize that if we just keep experimenting and we keep moving forward and we understand the law of averages, which is that, like you said, the more shots you take, the more likely you are eventually to get one. The more we're aligned with all that stuff, the easier life actually becomes. But for whatever reason, a lot of people, they get caught up in their illusions about life, I suppose, and they don't act in the way that reality actually works. How do people take all of this stuff that we're talking about understanding, ultimately that we're all we're in our mortal coils, and it's all going to end one day, and there's nothing we can do about it. But if we wake up to that and act with urgency and don't take ourselves so seriously, we can probably get where we want to be. Just to wrap this up, because I know you got to go soon, what are some final words of wisdom that you might have?
Absolutely, Ollie. To keep things simple, I would say Tony Robbins' quote, and I'll rephrase it for our audience, which is the quality of your life is solely determined by the quality of the questions that you dare to ask yourself about life.
Mm-hmm.
My version of Tony's quote is I dare each and every one of you listening to this podcast to ask yourself a hard question about life every single day. Because if you did that for 30 days, you'll never be the same human being ever again.
That's
And
awesome.
I think and that's the piece. It's all about if you ask yourself these questions, and I'll bullet a couple. If you had all the money in the world, how would you spend your time? If you could only accomplish three things in your life and only three, what would you want to accomplish and why? That helps you focus. And then I'll give you a third and final one, which is what is a goal or a dream that you secretly gave up on and never told anyone about? These are the questions that lead to the insights and help you drive the clarity and help express your creative uniqueness because there's only one version of you. So you might as
Mm.
well spend the time to figure it out.
Yeah, I love this thing about questions. It's actually a thing that came up on a recent episode that I recorded. The idea that questions, even just very simple questions, actually, I know we're talking about the hard ones, but even if you just ask, what if, and you start kind of rejigging or reconfiguring your thought process to just kind of get out of the hamster wheel of the same old shit you keep thinking, that's getting you the same old results you keep getting, then you can kind of start allowing more truth, more reality into your life. And that is what's going to put you on the path to kind of self-actualization and your real essence, or whatever it is that we want to call it. With the essence thing, just to get some clarity on that, what what is the essence specifically? I know it's different for all of us, but what do you see it as actually being?
It's a great question, Ollie. I like using the word essence because I think it's a good placeholder word, but I would say specifically what that means for me is making a list of things that you feel are unique to you that are weird about you. And the combination of everything that is weird about you is what your unique essence is in some way, shape, or form. So I'll give you an example. Right, I have a successful business. All that's great, but I also karaoke in 8 different languages. I also am super scared to drive, even if I have a license. I'm also in the top 1% of all listeners of Justin Bieber on Spotify. Right, so all this is bizarre, right? So when I add all of this weirdness, but notice I communicate my weirdness with comfort. So when you
Mm,
start adding up all of these things that make you weird, you realize that weirdness is actually a gift. I mean, don't you find it really odd that I chose communication as my life's purpose at like 22? Like, what the hell? Like, who does that? Like, most people just want to be rappers or YouTubers, whereas I'm so like self-aware that it really helps me go like, no, like I would be a shit basketball player. Like, I shouldn't be a rapper. I should be like I should be the greatest communication coach of all time. Like, how does one get to that conclusion? Like, it's so bizarre. And the only way that one gets there is through a result of excruciating questions and the ability to document the unique answers to those questions so that over time it creates this blob of a bunch of uniqueness things that you'll eventually look at on a piece of paper, and you'll circle that one thing that you go, that's my thing, and then you become razor focused and win the game.
Do you think a lot of people well, it's kind of a pointless question because the answer is obvious, but a lot of people, I'm not going to frame it as a question, a lot of people judge their own weirdness, and actually that just causes them to not move up that hierarchy towards self-actualization, even if they've got their survival stuff in place. Why do we or what can we do about self-judgment that's going to stop us figuring out our weirdness and then expressing it in these creative ways?
Here's a simple way to explain that. I always say this: never say wow, always ask how. So let me repeat that again. Never say wow, always ask how. Think about the three people in your life, or the audience listening, actually the number one person that you admire the most in your life, who's very successful, who has everything you want, and ideally is a celebrity. So that way you can look them up, you can study them. They might have been on a podcast or something. But what most people don't do is they don't link the person they want to admire or the person they do admire with the understanding of their success, which is don't say wow, don't gloat about them, don't talk, don't admire them, actually understand at a granular level what made them successful in the first place. And you'll come to a very simple conclusion, Ollie, that all of them are crazy. Like, all of them follow their unique, like, it's not like 93%, it's not 95%, 100.00% of everybody you admire who has achieved an ungodly amount of success in their life, in any area of life. It doesn't have to be money, it's health, it's relationships. They have naturally are crazy. Like, they've done the things that are absolutely nuts. They follow their uniqueness. It's like Kobe Bryant is not a normal human being. Like, he's crazy. Like, when he was 12 years old, he made a list, literally, and you don't need to take my word for it. You can look up interviews called the Kill List. It was called the Kill List, which is basically a list of 50 basketball players who were in their tens. And he was like, I want to beat and smash all 50 of these people. So he'd go to all these basketball games when he was 12, and he's like, I'm going to beat you, I'm going to beat you, I'm going to beat you. And by the time he was 15, he was the number one person on that list, and then he got drafted into the NBA out of high school. That's a story most people don't know. So they know Kobe Bryant. Oh, I know who Kobe was and the life that he lived, but I don't understand what made him successful because I don't spend the time to do that. So when you realize that, you go, oh, okay, so the person I admire is crazy. So if I want to be like that person, by definition, I need to be crazy. And that's why my closing quote is always, be insane or be the same. If you want to be like everyone else, that's totally fine. But if you want to live a life that's unique, you need to make unique decisions. If you want to be in the top 1% of anything, that automatically implies that you cannot do what 99% of people are doing, so you get the results nobody else gets.
That's awesome. So just to get a bit of clarity about that, I won't keep you talking for too much longer because I know you got to go, but what is your definition of crazy here? Is it just following your own path? Or going against the grain of society? Like, what does it mean to be insane in this kind of creative way that we're on about?
Dude, I love this question. Your questions are so good. I'm so impressed. I would say for me, my definition of crazy, Ollie, that I wish more people asked me, is simply this: the ability to make decisions that only make sense to you. Let me repeat that again. The definition of crazy is making decisions that only make sense to you. Like, if you're making decisions, and not every decision needs to be that way, but if a good amount of those decisions literally don't make sense to your mom, even your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your best friend, that is my definition of crazy. Like, when I quit my job to pursue MasterTalk, literally every single person except like 5 people and my Rolodex of what hundreds and thousands of people told me I was nuts. Those 5 people were like, yeah, I think this makes sense, but everyone else was like, you're crazy.
Mm,
And that's why it was the right decision for me to make.
mm.
If there are decisions in your life that make sense to other people in general, you're probably not crazy enough.
Yeah.
So that's my definition. That's my barometer.
Yeah, that's an incredible definition, and I completely agree with it. I think I've found in my own life, on my own creative journey, normally when people are trying to talk you out of something, that is when a lot of the time, not always obviously, but a lot of the time, you need to push through and do it. Because when they're giving you that kind of unwarranted advice, usually, they're actually telling you what they think is possible for themselves. And it's not what they know is possible for you or you know is possible for yourself based on what you've been through and what's calling to you from your essence and all that kind of stuff. And so you're right completely. Like, actually, being crazy is actually part of the solution to being more creative. Although, actually, I would say a lot of the time, what's called craziness by the world is actually just sanity. It's just that the world surrounding you is actually insane and they don't understand the relationship that you have with yourself on a very real level based on your relationship with reality, based on pushing through all these kind of things we've talked about. So experimenting to get more knowledge about yourself, facing death and all that kind of stuff so you can see how things actually work and that time is valuable and that it's crazier to go work in the wage cage for 40 years, whatever it is, rather than take a risk, which other people would also say is crazy, and go out there and get the life that you actually want and do shit that you actually want to do. So yes, I completely agree. The way I always look at it, I know I'm a bit long-winded now, there's a difference between the world and reality. Most people live in the world, but if you want to be real in the sense of getting results that actually matter to you, you need to tap into reality at the level of yourself and the world and reality itself, because reality is the only place where things can actually happen and you can actually get results. And so in an unreal world, acting on these creative impulses and our essence in the way that you're on about, it seems insane, but it's actually very true. And if the truth is involved, I think it's actually sanity. So I don't know if that makes any sense to you, if I'm chatting nonsense, but I love that definition. It makes a lot of sense. Um, what do you think about that before I wrap up and kind of go kill myself or something?
Stay alive, Ollie. You're a pretty good introvert. I think you should stick around just for a few more years. I'm
All
kidding.
right, just a few
No,
more.
so a couple of thoughts, man. I would say the first one is, let's take Stan Lee as an example, the guy who created Spider-Man. I mean, who would have thought Spider-Man was a good idea? Like, does it sound really stupid when you think about it? Some guy's in a spider costume. He's called Spider-Man. Like, who in the world would think that's a great idea? Like, and most people in his corner told him it was a stupid idea, and he just went forward with it anyways, and it worked.
Yeah,
He had a great storyline that
yeah,
worked. And I think that goes back to insanity and making those decisions, is if we have the courage to actually push through those decisions and make them happen. Sure, a lot of them will be wrong, but you only need one of them to be right to make a massive impact in the world. So I would encourage you to push for that
yeah.
decision.
It comes back to the judgment thing. If you judge yourself because of your own emotional relationship with yourself, whatever you've got going on beneath the surface, then when these other people start doubting you and your creative ideas or the vision that you've created for yourself, when they start judging that vision, you'll judge it as well. And so, actually, what we need to do is to get to this place where we don't really have any judgment of ourselves, a bare minimum, which will stop us judging other people anyway. Then we can have a more effective relationship with reality and we can keep moving forward and all that stuff. I'm going to stop ranting because I've just seen how long we've been talking. Let's wrap it up. But Brenden, I think there's a lot we could talk about further down the line. It seems like we've only just got started, really. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast. I found that really valuable, and I think you've got some amazing insights and definitions of things and some great perspective. Is there anything final you want to say? Can you tell people, for example, where they can find you online if they want to get in touch with you or follow you on YouTube, all that stuff?
Absolutely, Ollie. This is exceptional. Thanks for having me on, and happy to have a follow up. So, 2 ways to keep in touch. The first one is the YouTube channel. Just go to MasterTalk in one word. You'll access to hundreds of free videos on how to speak. And the second way to keep in touch is to attend one of my free communication workshops that are fun, that are live over Zoom and interactive. even if you can keep your camera off if you're shy. And if you want to come to that, go to rockstarcommunicator.com.
Brilliant. I'll share all that stuff in the show notes. But Brenden, thank you so much once again. This has been super insightful, and talk to you again sometime soon.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks so much.